Hi, welcome to Superbone. This week we've got a bit of a different video for you. We're going to be doing an album review of Jennifer Wharton's Bonegasm's new album, Not a Novelty. Of course, I picked this up earlier this week, and you can hear it in the background. I'm going to keep playing the tracks as I talk about the album. It's a brilliant quartet album for trombones with rhythm section, which is absolutely down Superbone's path. That's what we started as, and it's great to see an artist really shine in this genre. I'm going to read to you a little bit from the liner notes now, and this is by Dan Belowski. The eponymous debut from Jennifer Wharton's Bonegasm broke the mold. There are no two ways about it. And while some may look at a statement like that and cry hyperbole, history begs to differ. With rare exception, the bass trombone, a horn forever typecast as an anchor, has been marginalised. So the idea of an ensemble featuring that denizen of the depths, a band playing music specifically commissioned to hinge on it, highlight it, and showcase the playing of one of its foremost practitioners, had no real precedent. But if anyone thought this group's maiden voyage was built around the allure of an oddity, they seriously missed the point. It was the work of an artist and outfit with a well-charted direction and strong intentions, and it left a clear message in its wake. This is not a novelty. To be honest, I'm not the most, wordy kind of person. That's why I play trombone. So reading this stuff out, a lot of the times when I'm reading liner notes, a lot of the words a little too big for me. So stick with me. My review is going to really be more centered around what the group does in terms of arrangements, the roles each trombone plays in the group, and certainly the rhythm section, and just a few ideas about, what I thought of each track. So this is the first track. It's Bongasmo, written by Michael Eckroth, who is the pianist of the group. I love this track starting off the album because it really starts it off right, that whole Latin percussion groove, and instantly we see a bass and a bass bone line married together, which is, throughout the entire album, it's really a signal that we're going to hear much more of this, and it's a really good combination. It gives that trombone meat with the bass kind of pluckiness, and I just really love the sound, so it's great that it's all the way through the album. I'm getting a real Perez Prado vibe from this type of Latin groove. Again, I'm not the most wordy person, but I just love that type of Latin groove. I really find Jennifer Wharton's playing on the whole album to be quite ballsy. She's got such a lovely way of approaching notes, but also being able to blow a nice tone through it. And often in her solos, you don't hear a lot of moving the sound around, rather than just beautiful, beautiful tone, which is really refreshing from an improvisation point of view. Of course, the solo in this is from Nate Mayland, and he has great feel and rhythm. One of the things I did find in this track is that his solo gets a little lost with the bone backings that come in later in his solo. So it's a shame that I don't really hear him on top of the sound. That's really a mixing issue, but he does a great solo in this. One of the other things is in this arrangement, he has great links, Michael Eckroth, the pianist, and plenty of harmonic crunch, which I like to hear. So it's like unison lines and then a harmonic crunch, and I find the group actually uses the dynamics quite well. And ending on a little bit of a Bond chord there. So that was Bongasmo. Up next, we have a tune called Face Value, and this is from saxophonist composer Remy Leboeuf. This is a free-flowing light feel in 4. It's quite heavy in syncopation, and there's lots of long tones. So it's quite a nice contrast to the first track, kind of chills it out. It just gets us used to that trombone sound. You can hear it there. It's just so languid, and really that's what I'm looking for when I'm looking for smooth playing from a trombone. It's just breathing. Quite lovely. Again, we hear the bass bone playing some melodies. I think there's quite lovely interplay between the bass bone and the lead on this track. And we're going to fast forward a little here. We're going to get to Jennifer's solo here. Now, one of the things that I was thinking about when I was listening to this is really how does she approach all of the improv from a bass bone perspective? Because often when you're playing tenor bone, you're a tenor voice. So when you get to the climax, you're up in the upper register, and you know your high notes are your climax. But it's interesting with bass bone because in this setting, especially when you've got an upright bass, I think that it's really smart to make climaxes like just completely flipped over and having them low, because that's the strength of the bass trombone, is those beautiful low pedal tones. And she does a really good job of this. Ending on a pedal tone there. So it's really great to hear something different. There's a really different voice in jazz that you don't hear a lot of. Usually when you get a bass solo, everyone goes and gets a drink. But you know, they tend to also work up into the top of their range when they want to really build. So it's really interesting. And especially with this tune, with a lot of long tones, I find that that's quite refreshing, that she's really, you know, sort of languishing on those long tones as a climax to every line that she plays. So she's certainly not shy about using the lower register in the improv, and I think it's mixed quite well in order to really show that through. You know, the bass isn't high in the mix, so you can really hear that soloist just at the fore. In this tune as well, I find the rhythm does a really good job of flowing. It's got a nice kind of river running style to it. And later in the tune, we're going to skip to that. We see a drum solo. Where is it? So coming up here, he's really just filling between a lot of stuff that happens. And this happens a couple of times on the album, where the drums are soloing over melodic fragments, and you know, really quite a full arrangement. It's not just like, hey, let's go to the bar, as with a bass solo. It's really, we're all involved with building your solo, which is great to hear because it really gives the drummer something to work with. We're going to skip to the next track here. Now this is Icefall. This is a tune by Chris Creek, who's a composer, a soprano sax player on this album, which is called Vine, released in 2000. Arranged by Alan Ferber, who's one of the quartet's members. I love this track for its chilled 6/8 vibes. And it's really great to hear at the start of this track some bucket work on the trombones. Of course, every time you put a bucket in, often people think, oh, you just want to be quiet. It's not really. It's about changing the tone, and it works perfectly with this kind of chilled jazz sound. Of course, every arrangement seems to be a little different, and I find the arrangements done by the members of the quartet, I feel like they're more of the identity of the quartet, as opposed to when the composer arranges the trombones. But there's lovely clean duo lines in this. It's two trombones working together, which is brilliant to hear. And also, this is a great start to the album. We've got three really quite different tracks, and the third one, this one, Icefall, has everyone trading solos in the trombone section, which is great because we get to hear the differences in their characters, which I think is a brilliant way to introduce the ensemble. If you haven't heard Bonegasm before, you will have after this track, and they've all got different characters to their soloing, which is really great to hear as well. Let's see if we can get to the trading bits. So a little bit of piano solo there. You can instantly hear the pan is different as well. One trombone on the right and the new trombone on the left. But also the tone they each have. It's quite remarkable actually that they're able to blend so well as an ensemble in this whole album. There's some really brilliant, ensemble playing where they're all playing unison and it sounds like one instrument. But then when you go to the solos, they definitely have their different character. Here's Jennifer. And it must be difficult as a bass trombonist, I think, when you come to improvise, because, you're down in the depths a lot. So it's really great to hear her just comfortable in the range that she operates in, which is the sweet spot for the bass trombonist anyway, so why not? So that's that track. Again, this is another example of where they take the drum solo and they don't just bugger off and let the drums do it. It's a lovely lilting piano and bass thing, which I think is just a lovely end to this track. So that was Icefall. Chris Creek, obviously, and arranged by Alan Farber. On to the next track. This is called Blue Salt. And let's see if I can get this name right. This is by Ain Inserto, who's a Boston composer with her own big band. And it's described as her big band, I love this description, the original neighborhood big band, led by a short Asian woman who likes to cook for her band. I want to be a part of that band, that sounds great. Fantastic stuff. Now, this is another one from a composer who's not a trombonist. So it's interesting to hear how they approach the ensemble. Obviously, she's not shy in giving the trombones some really tricky lines. This whole track is very arranged and there's a lot going on. It's actually quite a hard listen to at times because it's not an easy kind of, oh, I'll just sit back with a Pinot and have a chill. It's actually quite involved. So definitely a track that has a lot in it. I actually think this whole vibe at the start sounds something like from a Broadway production. In my head, when I first heard it, I was like, this is like West Side Story or something like that. But it's interesting. It goes into an Afro-Cuban feel for the solos. The interesting part about this arrangement, or this composition, is that there's a lot of piano playing with the bones. So a lot of the time in the other arrangements, it's bones that are on top. And really, this gets a much different sound to the arrangement because the piano's playing a unison line with the trombones, and it's all really tight. I mean, the playing on this album is really top-notch. It's fantastic ensemble playing, which is exactly what I want to see from a trombone ensemble. As well as their rhythm section, it's great that they've got such a want to really get it as tight as possible. And this is probably one of the hardest tracks on the album to get tight. So they've done a really good job of it. But yeah, it's just that piano sound just on top of the trombone in the same register as well, which is quite interesting. You wouldn't put octaves on it or anything. So it's great to hear. And really interesting writing from someone who's not a trombonist to write some really quite difficult stuff to play for trombone, and again, it's really well played by the ensemble. I'm going to get forward into the solos because there's some really good playing. When they switch styles, one of the things that really draws my ear is they keep the same sound to their playing. Obviously, it's hard to change sounds, but the approach changes slightly, and it's much more smooth style here from Jennifer. I think it just fits the style better. She's just, I guess she's a bit looser, actually, which is interesting. There's a spot here I want to see if I can find, which I think is absolutely brilliant. Here it is. Brilliant break from John Fedchock into that solo, and this is my favourite solo of the album. I think he just does a great job over a swinging style, and you know, it doesn't sound fast at all, but it's quite fast, but he makes it sound so easy, so it's a really great solo from him. I'm probably going to transcribe that, I think, next week, because it is really good there's so much stuff in there that I'd love to grab. Now, the other thing in his solo, I find this quite interesting when you're listening to a solo on a track that you've just heard. This section, there's a lot of stops. So I find that, actually, this is one of the hardest things to solo over, because really, I mean, the drums keeps going, but everything around you is stopping. So, and it seems quite random. So I find that really hard to solo over. So they've done a really good job, and it's very well navigated by the ensemble to get those stops so tight, because again, this is a really tricky track. Now, I guess, you know, based on this track, there's only one way you could finish that, and that's with Afro-Cuban ad-libbing from everyone. Actually really well done by the ensemble, and I guess really well mixed as well. It just gives everyone their own space. It's not a big section, but I like the addition of it. It's actually, the first time I listened to this track, I was a bit confused, and obviously my ears, you know, get given a bit of a workout. But after listening to it 4 times, I actually really like that as a piece. This is probably one of my favourite tracks on the album, and it's written by Alan Ferber, again, and it's called Union Blues. And I just think it's at the right place in the album. The playing is really nice here, featuring Jennifer on a lot of those melodies, which is fantastic. It's great playing, and you know, the writing to me just makes it so easy to play. There's a line up here. It's coming up here. Here we go. and really, as a trombonist, I just absolutely love that line. Yes, that was it. The slow swing that's just, sit back on it. And really, I think that's why I like this track, because I'd love to play it. But it's really brilliant writing, because it's interesting as well. It's not just like, here's another blues lick over another blues lick, and you've heard that blues lick before. It's actually quite original. But we get those blues harmony, real like crunchy stuff, a lot of sharp nines in there. So it's, for me, one of my favourites. And, you know, it's just really well played. One of the things that I found about this album is that a lot of the solos are quite, they're good solos, but what's underneath them is quite complicated. So I feel like the rhythm section isn't given room to stretch out as well as the soloist, because I think that's one of the great things about jazz, is that it lives, and every time you play a solo, it's different, and the rhythm section can react different, and it feels alive. And I think that's where this track really gets to on the album, is that the first time I've really heard anything that emulates anything live, which is great to have. I think it needs it, being a jazz album, and so far it's been quite in a box. You know, this is the lines we play, and then there is an improv solo, but good luck. So anyway, I just I just wanted to point that out because just for me, it feels like this is a lot more freer and just a bit more, I guess, this has more of an essence of older style arrangements, whether rather than something that is composed directly for Bonegasm, which a lot of these tracks have been, and of course that's why they've turned out that way. For those of you who are still with me, thanks for watching. I do talk a little bit more than the normal person, and maybe I'm over explaining things, but I just love the album. I want to give you guys a chance to hear it, but also give you some of my thoughts, so hope you're enjoying it. Going back to this track, it does sound like it's a lot of fun to play. The one thing in the bass solo here is... Where is it? I've missed it. So I've gone past the bass solo. There was a lot of unison dirge lines here. And for me, like, when you're writing for bass trombone, give them that. They love it. And I love it. I mean, I'm not a bass trombonist. I'd like to be when I finally buy an instrument. But really, for me, that's like the essence of bass trombone is like, yeah, I like making fart noises. What's wrong with that? Yes, lovely. And that, for me, you've got to indulge that. We're trombonists. We enjoy it. We have a slidey thing. We like having fun. You know, even making a little bit of a joke about ourselves. But some brilliant stuff. This is quite a weird section of this track. I do like it. And I wonder where you would have gone if you didn't do this. This is like a march style kind of weird section. Actually, it reminded me of like Toy Soldiers, which again fits into the not a novelty theme. Even though Toy Soldiers are a novelty, but it's a little bit of a wink to that. I guess, you know, one other idea you might have been able to have is do like a shout chorus for the Bones. Would have been great to really hear them kick in and do some trills and, you know, some shakes and, you know, a lot more kind of digging in playing. But of course, it is an original composition, so, you know, my thoughts on how I would arrange it, as opposed to how he wrote it, you know, is not really that valid. But I do love the way it ends. It's a really great track. So if you're going to listen to one track off the album, I'd listen to this one first, and then maybe the last track on the album next, I think, is probably the next best. Into the next track here. This one's called Twinkle, and it's a Tori Amos tune. What I love about this album is obviously Jennifer, being a 90s child, you know, wanted to put a couple of tunes on that she grew up with and meant something to her, but it's great to play them on trombone. And we've been doing that a lot on Superbone, actually. I arranged tunes that I know really well, that I know from my childhood. You know, and I enjoy playing them, and I hope you guys enjoy listening to them, because in the end, like, original compositions are fantastic, and it's great to make new sounds, and that's what all this group is about. But having a couple of covers on the album is a really great idea, because it's something we can really latch onto. And there's some really beautiful playing in this. This is a gorgeous ballad, arranged by John Fedchock. I really love his writing. He seems to write really great inner parts, which I think is the essence for me of a trombone ensemble. It's really easy to write your lead line and your bass line, and then just go, oh, the middle parts, well, they're just alto voices, you know, whatever. We don't care. They can just play the same note the whole way through. But it's some really nice playing, and actually his ability to use a lot of open intervals and harmonies that really open up the sound and give it more space in the arrangement is fantastic to hear. It is a really beautiful arrangement. I wrote a note here. It's like rays of sunshine poking through a cloud. You know, it's got the warmth coming through, but it's just little kind of pockets of harmony, you know, in this big open space that we have. John Fedchock plays the solo in this tune, and he approaches it with such simplicity and beauty. I read on the liner notes that he didn't change the melody from the original much at all to the trombone, which I think is another great way of approaching a tune, because when it comes down to it, it's always going to sound different because it's not sung. And really that's the essence of the melody, is, you know, what she's saying. And if you change it too much, it becomes a different beast. And I guess there's not a lot of need in my mind to do that. Of course, sometimes you do need to, because the melody is not fantastic, but it's a good melody in the first place, so why change it? It's just a beautiful track, and, you know, looking at the set list of the album, and you know, going through, you know, we haven't had one track that's been similar so far, and we're into the 6th track, so that's great programming as well from Jennifer and the guys in the ensemble. We're going to skip ahead to the next one, but highly recommend listen to this with your eyes shut, maybe in a dark room. It's really beautiful. And again, I love John's solo in this. I think John is one of the most beautiful soloists on this album. So he's really done a great job here, and you can hear his ability to hit every note just perfectly right, even when he's soloing, and he doesn't sacrifice the tone that he's after in order to play more fast notes or something different, or something that might be technically really difficult. And of course, he's capable of playing it, which is fantastic. It makes it sound so easy. Even the high notes, you think, oh, he's reached for that, but it just sounds just right, which is brilliant. Let's move on to the next track here. I think this track is probably one of the hardest listens on the album. And it's not such a bad thing. Again, it's like Blue Salt, where it's been quite overly composed and arranged. And I think when you do that, it's a statement of originality, but often, I think that's probably why people, you know, generally don't like things like free jazz, because it's just very complicated. And for our ears, we want to hear the same thing. And what's a really interesting point is this part of the track kind of sounds like a bit of Pat Metheny big band stuff, but I really like that bit. And then it just goes away, and I'm left with not that bit. And I just wish it would continue in that vibe. It just seems a bit chopped up. Again, original track, and it is a really interesting sound that she gets out of the trombone ensemble. It's probably the most different track out of all of the album. So that's again another achievement there to give it a different voice. And I think when you're buying this album, I don't think you're buying it because you want to hear Tori Amos. I think you're buying it because you want to hear new jazz music written for the trombone quartet with the rhythm section. You know, and really, in the grand scheme of things, right at the moment, these guys are leading the way in really pushing that genre, which is fantastic. And I'm all on board. But yeah, that was one of the things that really got to me on this track. Was I felt confused. Maybe I'm just not that intelligent. But I just wanted that bit at the start to just continue, because I really like that bit, and it just sort of goes away. And you know, the solos on this, I think are quite good. Mayland plays a solo a bit later. This is quite a long track too. It's 9.5 minutes. Well, it's almost 10 minutes. And Mayland's solo, it seems like he's a victim of the backing that's underneath it. It doesn't really gel together with, you know, the rest of the track, and I imagine that's difficult to play over. So that's where I am with this track. One of the things that is interesting about this, it seems to create a lot of space with its momentum. So there's this building section, and then it'll bring it right back. And there's even points in the track where there's actually just that little bit of silence, which again is quite an achievement to get when you've got 7 musicians playing, to really get that suck in. Even in small sections is really great to hear, and it's actually quite hard to write that. So it is exceptional writing, but I'm finding it hard to listen to. It did start off with that bass and bass bone unison line idea, and I wonder whether Jennifer gave that as a brief to some of the composers, or whether they just picked it up from previous things they'd heard of hers, maybe the first album. I'm actually quite new to Bonegasm. When I started the Superbone channel a year ago, it was one of the first things I picked up on. I'm like, oh, that's an interesting name for a trombone quartet, and look, they're a jazz trombone quartet, so I was really drawn to them. But I haven't actually checked out the first album, which is a bit of a shocking thing to say from someone who runs a jazz trombone ensemble YouTube. So I'm going to listen to it and probably do a review on it if I feel need to. But I really love what they're doing, and it's certainly great to hear new music written for it, and most of this album are new music, which is brilliant. So the other thing I wanted to say, see, it's come back, and I really love this bit. The other thing I want to really say about this track is that the piano solo seems to suit it a lot better. And maybe that's because the backings that were underneath the trombone contain trombone as well. I don't know. Sometimes my ear is drawn to things I'm used to, and I think maybe that's the problem. But you can hear just the general tonality of this track and the vibe of it, I think is much more a piano thing. Interesting to note, the composer of this is Carmen Staff. She's a pianist and a composer based in New York. So there's probably an insight into why the tune sounds a lot better with the piano solo. Now, Alan Ferber does a solo here, and I think the backing over this part of the solo is much easier to play with. So I think it does really make a big difference. And I'd be interested to see whether anyone else has got some suggestions of music where a solo is on an album that maybe you think isn't as good a solo as it could be because the backings kind of take away from it. We're going to move on though, because we have more to listen to. This is the second Latin-inspired tune on the album. This is by Manuel Valera, who's a Cuban pianist. Again, another pianist. And I think this is probably one of the ones that works quite well with that different style of arranging, not from a trombonist, but from a rhythm section player. There is a lot of unison lines in here, and the group does really well at playing them. If there's 4 of them playing it at once, it sounds as tight as one person playing it, which is a really great thing to hear, especially with a recording such as this. Quite tricky little lines in this, but I absolutely love the style. I mean, he's a Cuban, so he knows what he's talking about, and really it suits the trombone quartet so well. So I'd like to hear an all Cuban or Latin-inspired album from Bongasm. I think they could quite easily do it, and it does suit the ensemble well. There's an interesting solo here from Alan Ferber, and he quite attacks the solo. He's got a great intention, and his attitude is there, which I think when you're working with such homogenized, is that a word? Sounds as a trombone, where it's all just like a big blanket, you need a little bit of attitude to really set it apart. There's a bit of a growl there. I haven't heard much of that on this album, and it's all beautiful sounds, and that's what they're aiming at. So I think the ensemble sound is really well established by this time, that it's nice to hear something a little more grunty on the album. So, I mean, it is a long listen to this point, and, you know, I'm at the 9th, 8th track, and I'm getting a bit bored of the unison lines, to be honest. I thought there'd be a bit more arranging happening on the album, and there is plenty. I mean, I'm picking holes here where there's probably nothing, but you know, I guess as an arranger, my idea of music that I want to hear is well woven together music, and I guess that's probably the difference in this track is it's not based, this type of music isn't based on that style of arranging and that style of music. So I think it just probably previous tracks having too much of that has, you know, kind of put me off the unison lines. But, you know, to be honest, that's just my opinion. You might think different. And I think maybe it's a symptom on this album of a lot of the composers not being trombonists. And as a trombonist, I want to hear the trombone stuff. Having said that, you know, you can forget all of that little rant before, because it is phenomenal playing, phenomenal writing. It's really just more of like, oh, are you killing my buzz while I'm sitting here enjoying your work that you've worked so hard to create? So that's why it's such a small thing for me. But, you know, these are all things that we take into account when we're writing, when we're arranging, is, you know, what's the appropriate thing to write? What kind of balance can we have across a whole album, which is quite a tricky thing these days to do, and used to be quite a skill in the, you know, 20, 30 years ago, is because you were releasing an actual album and an actual CD. And these days, a lot of stuff is just track after track, so you don't have to worry about that. So they have done a really good job of, you know, the actual track listing in this CD. But yeah, I think at this point, I'm just sick of the unison lines. That's all. Not that they're bad unison lines. I just want to hear more harmony. So there's lovely additions coming up here. I think it's right at the end of this track, from the percussionist on the album. He only plays on the first track and this track. They're both Latin inspired tracks. But it's just there, and I love that sound, the jazz drums with the Latin percussion. And he's obviously a world-class percussionist, so fantastic addition there in both those tracks. I think it's really important to just get those little things in there that really embody the spirit of that style. Now, this is probably the emotional part of the album. This is called Little Cupcake, and it's written by John Fedchock, and of course written for Jennifer Wharton, his wife. And it's actually, I was reading on the liner notes, it is a pet name he has for her, which is quite cute, actually. I'll read you what the liner notes say here. The title, this is what John said. The title comes from a pet name I call Jen in jest when she chooses to say something surprisingly off-color or unladylike, he explains. I think that's quite funny and cute. And of course, a lady bass trombone doing something unladylike. I've never heard of that. But brilliant little tune here, and I was really happy to hear the chorale at the start. I think as trombonists, we a lot of us come from a classical background when we started learning, and you know, we'll have played Bach chorales, and you know, I think it's in our DNA to play smooth hymn-like chorales, and really I think it's a lot to do with the voice of the trombone being that, well, you know, is it Berlioz said it was the voice of God or angels or something like that, and I think that really that has something to it, because there is such a beauty to the trombone tone, especially when it's together in an ensemble. and it really has a voice of its own when it's all together. Certainly, like, you know, trumpet ensemble. Have you ever heard a trumpet ensemble sound so beautiful? A saxophone ensemble, you know, it's got its merits. It's a bit more sultry, I guess, in that sound. But certainly a trombone ensemble can really bring that warmth, and it's such beauty in the tone. I love the way that the tune's been turned into a little groove in 3. 3 is a really important number when it comes to hymns. Going back to like early days of notation, all the most sacred hymns were in 3. It was considered a sacred number by the church, of course, where all the music started, and you know, so it still has a symbolism for me when you get a hymn-like tune in 3. One of the things that's really lovely in this is, it's, you know, everyone on this album plays so well, and I've got to give a big shout out to the rhythm section, because it sounds like they're really part of the ensemble. It's not just a rhythm section they've hired in. It's not the local guys at the jazz club because you're doing a tour. It's Bonegasm, and the pianist in this does some really lovely fills, which are just really complementing the sound. And it's not, hey, look at me. It's perfect. It's really nice. I also love this track because this is more like it that I would expect to hear from a trombone ensemble. Probably because it's written by John Fedchuk, who is a trombonist. So I think it really does come down to those middle voices and picking those best notes to really just bring that warmth and bring it all together, so it's one voice rather than 4 voices together. And I think the other thing that a lot of the other composers have done is they've stayed away giving the tenor bones anything low, which I think works in a way. It keeps all the melodies and stuff up in the upper register, which does sing, but it loses a bit of the ensemble playing, which is given by all that low stuff, you know, in that lower register. And when you've got such a great bass trombonist, I just like to see more connection with that bass trombonist. It seems like a lot of this has been bass trombone and 3 tenor trombones right above it. So it's great to hear that. You can hear that lower, the third voice is really, it's not afraid to be down there. And it really does make a different sound. I could listen to Jennifer soloing all day, to be honest, because she does nothing that tricky, but it's just appropriate, and it's really great melodies. It's really intuitive playing, and it also sits really nicely on her instrument. So, you know, as the liner note said, she is one of the leaders of this style in bass trombone. So it's really great to, you know, really get my hands into this album. Now, there was a fugue-like solo before her solo, which built quite nicely into a solo. So another example of this, you know, really trombonistic writing from John Fedchuk. Right after the bass bone solo, as I said, she doesn't play anything too tricky, but the pianist just takes off. This is probably the faster stuff on the CD, which is really interesting that it's in this kind of slower tune. Yeah, it's one of those solos where I'm kind of looking at the whole aspect of what they're doing rather than every note. I can't hear every note. It's more texture driven soloing, isn't it? So and rhythmic solo driven. So I think it's quite a nice change, actually. It's right at the end of the CD that we hear the fastest piano soloing, really. The one thing about this track that did confuse me a little was the ending. Again, a original thing. I think this bit is fine. You know, it's just dying down. We're going to skip towards the end, but I think. That's a really cool bit. There's a little bit of chorale there, but it's not really chorale. I mean, nothing wrong with the writing. Not sure about that. Well played, well written. Just before we go forward into that, I do think it could have used that chorale again at the end, and certainly as a arranger, that's what I would have done. Did it need it? Probably not, but I probably would have done that. Now, this is the last track, and probably, to be honest, you know, if you wanted to listen to one track off the album that was really interesting, that gave you an insight into what the trombone ensemble could do, with all the different trombone techniques, this is probably it. This is The Day I Tried to Live, and it's actually a Soundgarden song arranged by an incredible arranger, composer, Darcy James Argue. And this also features Kurt Elling on the vocals, and wow, he is something special. Before I press play, because I'm going to let you listen to the start of this without me talking, there is some brilliant writing in this for mutes, and also the use of the gliss, which, you know, I've seen a few people talking on social media about, you know, how do we use that, such a iconic part of the trombone sound that often is just turned into a comic kind of thing. And I think it's used quite well here at the start. Have a listen. So I think there's a couple of mutes there. Maybe they're all on mutes. Maybe one was a Harmon. It could be a Pixie and Plunger thing. I'm not sure. Sometimes it's hard to tell the difference. But it's a really interesting way to start the tune. Certainly being a grungy rock track, I think that it definitely fits it. And Kurt Elling here is gorgeous, so beautiful. He's so perfect for this sound, and he gets this really great vocal tone. You know, when I first heard it, it was really funny actually, because I was like, this sounds familiar. I didn't read anything about it before. I didn't read the liner notes or anything, and I was like, I know this tune. I'm sure I know this tune. So it is a really good cover in that, you know, it is slightly different from the original, obviously, with the use of trombones. But I miss the guitar. I want a little more distortion. I almost want some distorted trombone. There's plenty of like attitude in the playing. And Kurt Elling is spectacular. It's brilliant. And I absolutely love the arrangement. He does a really good job of tying in the trombones to this. And you can hear all these effects being done, which is great. And they're not let's plug in an effects pedal effects. They're literally acoustic effects, which is great that they're able to just, you know, you can play that anyway. You don't have to plug in something. And it shows the versatility of the trombone, which is also great. I just wish, I think the pianist is playing the Rhodes on this. I wish he'd have more crunch in it. And I think the drummer needs to rock out a little more. The bassist gets a really great sound on this, actually. It's really the right sound. I want to go forward to this little bit, because this is just brilliant from Kurt. So Jennifer does a solo on this. And Kurt answers, and it's just such a great... To be honest, I really like Kurt's trombone sound. He does such a great job of doing plunger trombone with his voice. One of the things I kind of wish Jennifer would do is just pick up that trombone and do some growling, because it really calls for it. You know, but they work so well together. And I think it's really credit to both Jennifer and Kurt on their ability to do this track as they did and keep it fresh. One of the problems with this section is that it's the same thing over and over again chord-wise. So what the arranger, Darcy James Argue, has done is he's done some interesting timing and also some interesting alterations in the arrangement, which keeps it from being, oh, that's the same riff. Oh, that's the same riff. Again. So we're just going to skip forward. Yeah. Yeah, I think, you know, overall, it's a great choice to end the album with. And I think that, you know, you've got to have a little bit of a humour if you're going to be a trombonist running a trombone quartet with rhythm section. Especially if the lead player is the bass trombone. And I think that's been one of the highlights for me of this album is I haven't heard a bass trombone be used as dynamically as it is on this album and used in so many melodies. And I think that's a real strength of it because it's unique. It's not just another trombone ensemble, it's Jennifer's trombone ensemble. And I think that gives us a great identity to them. And I think that it's actually really refreshing to hear that used as a primary voice. Really, in this whole album, the bass trombone has, you know, probably, if not the primary role, the secondary role. It's never put right at the bottom, just, oh, you just play this one thing over and over again until you're bored, which is great to hear. And right at the end we hear the Rhodes. I didn't really catch it during the actual track, but that's the end of the album. And I think overall I really enjoy listening to it, and I think they've done an absolutely brilliant job, especially with how things were last year, to record a original album. You know, one of the things I was thinking about when I thought about reviewing this was how refreshing it must be for those players to be able to focus on this album without outside influences such as gigs affecting what they play. And I think it gets a more pure sound to the album because there isn't those outside influences of, oh, I've just got to go and do a gig for a Blues Brothers band or whatever they do, or I've got to go play on Broadway. You know, I've got to do my pit show, or I've got to play in an orchestra. I think it really affects us as musicians. It's really a special musician who's able to put that aside when they get into the recording studio, and they've been able to do this without those distractions. Of course, it can't have been easy, but they've done a phenomenal job, and I absolutely love the album. It's the right length for an album. It's got enough interesting stuff. I think it's got something for everyone. If you're not a trombonist, you'll love Kurt Elling. If you know, and you'll probably like a lot of the other stuff. If you love Latin stuff, there's stuff there for you. If you love more modern jazz, there's definitely stuff in there. I wouldn't say there's too much bop, you know, crazy stuff. It's quite an easy listen. There's not a lot of really crazy effects trying to get different sounds out of the trombone. It is a trombone ensemble album. You can hear they play together well. They sound as one, but they also have their individual voices, and they're all able to shine. So that is my album review. I loved it. I hope you guys did. I hope you stayed with me for the whole time, because it's been a long time. I thought it'd be a short one, but I really wanted you guys to hear a lot of the album, and I wanted to let you guys know what to expect. I think from now on, I might do a few more album reviews as they come up. I like doing the new ones, but I actually have bought a couple of vintage trombone ensemble CDs in the last year that I think probably deserve a little bit of a video review to let you guys know that they're out there. There's quite a few CDs out there that aren't on the streaming services, so you guys might not have picked up on them. So I'll endeavor to get them to you because that's really content that I wanted to see, and when I looked for it, wasn't there. So I hope you guys enjoyed my review. We've got another great tune for you next week here on Superbone. But for now, I'll say goodbye.